The morning sun barely touched the dusty windows of Millfield Courthouse as Judge George Wilson fixed his black robes. At 62, with gray hair and tired blue eyes, he had spent 20 years on this bench. Today was just another Monday filled with traffic cases. Judge Wilson looked at his list without much interest. He had seen thousands of cases and they all seemed the same to him now. "Mary Baker," he called out in a bored voice. A tall black woman walked up to the front. She stood straight and proud, but her eyes showed worry. She wore simple clothes that were clean but clearly not expensive. "Ms. Baker, you were driving 45 miles per hour in a 30-mile zone on Oak Street. How do you plead?" Judge Wilson asked without looking up. "Guilty, Your Honor," Mary said in a clear voice. "But I need to explain. My son Jack had an asthma attack at school and—" Judge Wilson raised his hand to stop her. "The fine is $150. "Ms. Baker," Mary's shoulders dropped a little. "Please, Your Honor, I work 2 jobs. I'm a nurse's aide during the day and I study at night to become a full nurse. This fine will mean no food for a week for us." Judge Wilson finally looked at her properly. For a moment, something flickered in his eyes, perhaps doubt, but it quickly disappeared. "Rules are rules, Ms. Baker. Pay the clerk on your way out," he said firmly. "Next case." Mary walked away slowly, her head now bent in defeat. As she left the courtroom, Judge Wilson felt something unusual, a small voice in his head questioning if he had done the right thing. He quickly pushed the thought away. Mary stood outside the courthouse, looking at the fine paper in her hand. She had been saving every penny for her son's medicine and her running shoes. She needed those shoes to train for the London Marathon, where she hoped to raise money for the Heart Foundation. As she walked to the bus stop, Mary thought about her father who had died from a heart attack when she was just a child. No one had been there to help him. That's why she was training for the marathon, to help others like him. And that's why she had been speeding that day, rushing to her son who had inherited the same weak lungs she had fought against all her life. Later that evening, Mary sat at her small kitchen table counting coins from a jar labeled Marathon Fund. Her son Jack played quietly in the corner with his second-hand toys. "Mum, are you taking money from your running jar?" Jack asked, his young eyes seeing everything. Mary smiled at her 10-year-old son. "Just a little, love. We need to pay a fine." "Because you were rushing to get me from school?" Jack's face fell. "I'm sorry, Mum." Mary went to him and hugged him tight. "Don't you ever be sorry for needing help, Jack. That's what mums are for." She helped Jack take his evening medicine for his asthma, watching as he breathed carefully after, using his inhaler. After putting Jack to bed, Mary put on her old running shoes with holes in the sides. She couldn't afford to miss training even after this hard day. She ran through the streets of Millfield, each step helping to push away her worries. As Mary ran past Victoria Park, she thought about Judge Wilson and how he hadn't even listened to her reason for speeding. He had looked at her with cold eyes, seeing just another case rather than a person with real problems. One day, she thought as she picked up her pace, one day people will see me. What Mary didn't know was that her path would soon cross with Judge Wilson's again. Not in his courtroom, but in this very park, and when that happened, everything would change for both of them. As the night grew darker, Mary ran faster, her heart beating strongly despite all the challenges life had thrown at her. She was tired, worried about money, and unsure how she would manage everything. But as her feet hit the pavement in a steady rhythm, she felt something powerful growing inside her. Hope. Sometimes life's hardest moments lead to unexpected turns. And Mary Baker's story was just beginning. 3 days later, Judge Wilson decided to take his morning walk in Victoria Park. His doctor had warned him about his heart health, and these walks were supposed to help. The morning was cool and misty as he followed the path around the small lake. Judge Wilson didn't like exercise, but he liked the idea of dying even less. At 62, he lived alone in a large house filled with law books, but little joy. His wife had left him 10 years ago, tired of his coldness. His children rarely called. "Rules are rules," he often said. This simple phrase had guided his life and his work on the bench. It had also left him very much alone. As he walked faster, trying to reach the doctor's recommended heart rate, a sharp pain suddenly shot through his chest. It felt like someone was sitting on him, crushing his ribs. Judge Wilson gasped and clutched at his shirt. This can't be happening, he thought as the world began to spin. He tried to call for help, but no sound came out. His legs gave way, and he fell hard onto the gravel path. Through blurry eyes, he saw a figure running toward him. The person moved with the smooth steps of a trained runner. "Sir, can you hear me?" A woman's voice called. Judge Wilson tried to respond, but the pain was too great. He felt strong hands turning him onto his side. The woman checked his pulse and pulled out a phone. "I need an ambulance at Victoria Park," she said clearly. "Near the east entrance. A man is having what appears to be a heart attack." "Yes, I'm checking his pulse now. It's fast and irregular." As darkness started to close in, Judge Wilson felt the woman place something soft under his head. She held his hand and spoke calmly. "Help is coming. Stay with me," she said. "I'm Mary. Try to take slow breaths if you can." Mary? The name seemed familiar, but Judge Wilson couldn't place it. The pain was making it hard to think. "My dad had the same look on his face when it happened to him," Mary said, still holding his hand. "Nobody was there to help him. But I'm here for you. The ambulance is coming." Judge Wilson felt a strange peace despite the pain. This stranger was showing him more kindness than he had shown anyone in years. As he looked at her face one last time before losing consciousness, something about her seemed familiar. He woke up in a hospital bed with machines beeping around him. A doctor in a white coat stood at the foot of his bed. "Well, Judge Wilson, you're a lucky man," said Dr. Thomas Brown. "If that runner hadn't found you and known exactly what to do, we might be having a very different conversation right now." "Runner?" Judge Wilson's voice was weak. "Yes, a woman who was training in the park. She knew exactly what to do. Put you in the recovery position. Called emergency services right away and gave them precise details about your condition. She even rode in the ambulance with you." Judge Wilson tried to remember her face. "Did she give her name?" "Mary Baker, I believe. She's a nurse's aide at St. John's Hospital. Said she's training for the London Marathon to raise money for heart research. Interesting coincidence given your situation." Mary Baker. The name hit Judge Wilson like another shock to his system. The woman he had found without a second thought just days ago had saved his life. "Where is she now?" he asked. "She left after making sure you were stable." "Had to get to work," she said. Judge Wilson lay back on his pillow, his mind racing faster than his weak heart should allow. The woman he had dismissed so easily in his courtroom had shown him compassion when he needed it most. Dr. Brown checked the machines. "You had a mild heart attack, Judge. You'll need to make some changes: diet, exercise, stress management, and perhaps a different outlook on life." Those last words stayed with Judge Wilson long after the doctor left. A different outlook on life. He thought about Mary Baker running to his aid without hesitation. He thought about her mention of her father dying the same way, with no one to help. As he drifted off to sleep, Judge Wilson realized something important had shifted inside him. The rules he had lived by suddenly seemed cold and empty compared to the simple kindness a stranger had shown him. In his dreams that night, he kept seeing Mary's face as she helped him in the park, and he wondered if he would ever get the chance to thank her, or perhaps to make things right. 2 weeks later, Judge Wilson returned to his courtroom. His near-death experience had changed him in ways he was still discovering. The wooden bench felt different beneath him. The faces before him seemed more real, more human. His clerk, Mr. Bell, handed him the day's list of cases. "Welcome back, Your Honor. Everyone's glad to see you recovered." Judge Wilson nodded, scanning the names. His heart skipped when he saw it. Mary Baker, parking violation. When her case was called, Mary walked to the front of the courtroom. She looked tired, with dark circles under her eyes, but she still stood tall. She didn't seem to recognize him at first, which wasn't surprising. When she had last seen him, he had been lying nearly lifeless on a park path. "Ms. Baker," Judge Wilson said, his voice softer than usual. "We meet again." Mary looked up, confused. Then her eyes widened with recognition. "You're the man from the park," she said quietly. The courtroom fell silent. Everyone looked between the judge and the woman, sensing something unusual happening. "Yes," Judge Wilson said. "I believe I owe you my life." Mary shook her head. "I just did what anyone would do." "No," Judge Wilson said firmly. "Not what anyone would do. What a good person would do." He paused, even for someone who had not been good to them. Mary's eyes showed understanding. She remembered him now from her speeding ticket. "How is your son's asthma?" Judge Wilson asked. Surprise crossed Mary's face. "Jack is doing better, thank you." "And your marathon training? For the Heart Foundation, I believe?" "Yes," Mary said. "My father died of a heart attack when I was 10. No one was there to help him." Judge Wilson felt a knot in his throat. "And yet you were there to help me, despite how I treated you in this very courtroom." Mary didn't answer, but her eyes held no anger, only quiet strength. "Case dismissed, Ms. Baker," Judge Wilson said. Then more softly, "And thank you." As Mary turned to leave, Judge Wilson called out, "Ms. Baker, could you stay for a moment after court? I'd like to speak with you." When the courtroom cleared 2 hours later, Mary was waiting on a bench in the hallway. She looked anxious, checking her watch often. "I'm sorry to keep you waiting," Judge Wilson said, approaching her without his robes. In his regular suit, he looked smaller, more human. "Do you need to get to work?" "I have the afternoon shift today," Mary explained. "But I need to check on Jack first. May I buy you a cup of tea? Just for a few minutes?" They sat in the small cafe across from the courthouse. Judge Wilson studied Mary's face as she added milk to her tea. "Why did you help me?" he asked finally. "You recognized me, didn't you? In the park?" Mary looked thoughtful. "Not at first. You looked different without your robes and wig." She sipped her tea. "But even if I had recognized you right away, it wouldn't have mattered." "Why not?" "Because people are more than their worst moments or their mistakes," Mary said simply. "My father taught me that before he died." Judge Wilson felt shame wash over him. "But I didn't give you that same consideration in my courtroom." "No," Mary said honestly. "You didn't." "I've been thinking a lot during my recovery," Judge Wilson said, "about rules and about people, about what really matters." Mary nodded but didn't speak. She checked her watch again. "You need to go," Judge Wilson said. "But first tell me about your marathon. When is it?" "In 3 months," Mary said, her eyes lighting up for the first time. "If I can keep training. It's hard with work and Jack and my evening classes." "You're studying to become a nurse?" "Yes." 2 more years to go." Judge Wilson pulled out his card and wrote his personal number on the back. "I truly want to thank you properly. Would you let me know how I might help? With Jack or your studies? Or the marathon?" Mary took the card hesitantly. "You don't owe me anything." "This isn't about owing," Judge Wilson said. "It's about what I'm learning. About being human." As they parted ways outside the cafe, Judge Wilson watched Mary hurry down the street. For the first time in years, he felt something new growing in his heart. Not the pain that had nearly killed him, but something healing and warm. That night he sat in his quiet house and did something he hadn't done in years. He cried. That evening, Judge Wilson sat in his large, empty house thinking about Mary Baker. He could not forget the kindness in her eyes, even after how badly he had treated her. Sleep would not come to him. The next morning, he called in sick to the courthouse. Something he had never done without being in a hospital. He had work to do of a different kind today. Judge Wilson first visited the records office at the courthouse. He wanted to know more about Mary. With his position, it wasn't hard to get the information he needed. What he learned made his heart heavy. Mary had no other traffic tickets. She lived in a small flat in the poorest part of town. Her son Jack had been in the hospital 6 times in the past year for severe asthma attacks. She was indeed working. 2 jobs, nurse's aide by day and cleaning offices at night. Somehow, she was also taking night classes twice a week to become a qualified nurse. Next, Judge Wilson drove to St. John's Hospital during lunch hours. He found Mary in the children's ward, helping a small boy drink water. Judge Wilson, she said, surprised. "Is everything okay with your heart?" "My heart is still healing," he said truthfully, though not just in the way she thought. "Could I speak with you for a moment?" They sat in the hospital garden. Mary kept checking her watch. "I only have 10 minutes before I need to go back," she explained. Judge Wilson pulled an envelope from his pocket. "This is for you," he said, handing it to her. Mary opened it slowly. Inside was a check for $150, the amount of her original fine, plus another $350. "I don't understand," she said, trying to hand it back. "The $150 is your fine returned. The rest is to help with Jack's medicine or your running shoes or whatever you need," Judge Wilson explained. Mary shook her head. "I can't accept this. It feels like charity." "It's not charity," Judge Wilson insisted. "It's making things right." Mary still looked unsure. "Why are you doing this?" Judge Wilson looked at the flowers in the garden. "When I was lying on that path thinking I was dying, I realized I had lived by rules but forgotten about people. You showed me kindness I didn't deserve. It made me wonder how many others I had failed to truly see from my bench." Mary was quiet for a long moment. "Jack's birthday is next week," she finally said. "He wants a bicycle, but with his medication, costs." "Please," Judge Wilson said, "consider it a thank you for saving my life." After more talking, Mary finally accepted the check, tucking it carefully into her uniform pocket. "Could I meet Jack sometime?" Judge Wilson asked as they stood to leave. Mary smiled for the first time. "He's actually coming here after school today. His class is visiting the hospital as part of a health project." Later that afternoon, Judge Wilson returned to meet Jack. The boy was small for his 10 years, with his mother's kind eyes but a wariness that no child should have. "You're the man Mum helped in the park," Jack said after being introduced. "She said you were important." "Did she?" Judge Wilson asked, surprised. "She said every life is important," Jack explained. "That's why she wants to be a nurse." Judge Wilson knelt down despite his stiff knees. "Your mother is right, and she's the important one, not me." Jack smiled then, showing missing front teeth. He pulled an inhaler from his pocket. "I have to use this a lot, but Mum says one day I might not need it so much. She's training for a marathon to help people with heart problems," Jack continued proudly. "I'm going to cheer for her. Will you come too?" The simple invitation from the child touched Judge Wilson deeply. "I would be honored," he said. That night, Judge Wilson couldn't stop thinking about Mary and Jack. He made some phone calls to old friends who owed him favors, a doctor who specialized in childhood asthma, the head of the nursing school Mary attended, and finally the organizer of the London Marathon charity program. As he prepared for bed, Judge Wilson looked at the framed law degree on his wall. For decades, he had believed justice came from strict rules. Now he was learning that true justice needed something more: compassion and understanding. On his nightstand was a new purchase, a book about heart health and recovery. Next to it was a registration form for the Millfield Half Marathon that would take place 2 weeks before Mary's big London race. The doctor had suggested walking, but Judge Wilson had different ideas. If Mary could run to save lives, perhaps he could at least try to walk for one. For the first time in many years, Judge Wilson fell asleep with a sense of purpose and peace. 6 months had passed since that life-changing day in Victoria Park. The morning of the Millfield Half Marathon arrived with perfect weather, cool and sunny with a gentle breeze. Judge Wilson stood near the starting line, not as a runner but as a proud supporter. He wore a bright blue t-shirt that matched those of the 12 other people standing with him. On the shirts were printed the words Team Mary and a small heart symbol, Among his group were court clerks, 2 other judges, and even the hospital staff who had helped with Jack's new treatment plan. The boy himself stood at the front, bouncing. With excitement, his breathing clear and strong thanks to the specialist who had taken on his case. "Do you see her?" Jack asked, standing on tiptoes. Judge Wilson pointed to the group of runners warming up. "There she is." Mary looked different, now. Her running clothes were new, proper shoes, shorts, and a vest with the Heart Foundation logo. But the biggest change was in her face. The constant worry lines had softened. She looked stronger, more confident. When she spotted them, her smile lit up her whole face. She jogged over. "Jack, I didn't know you were bringing an army." She laughed, looking at the group in matching shirts. "It was Judge Wilson's idea," Jack said proudly. "Look, he made signs too." The judge held up a large poster that read, "Mary Baker, Heart Hero." Mary's eyes filled with tears. "You didn't have to do all this." "Yes, I did," Judge Wilson said simply. The announcer called for runners to take their positions. Mary hugged Jack tightly. "Remember to drink water at every station," Jack instructed seriously. "And don't start too fast like you did in practice." "Yes, Coach," Mary said with a smile, ruffling his hair. Before heading to the start line, she turned to Judge Wilson. "Thank you," she said quietly. "For everything." Judge Wilson shook his head. "I've done very little compared to you." As Mary joined the other runners, Judge Wilson thought about the past 6 months. He had used his connections to help get Jack into a medical study for a new asthma treatment. He had spoken to the nursing school about a special scholarship for single parents. And he had started a new program at the courthouse, one that allowed first-time traffic offenders to explain their circumstances. His colleagues had been surprised by these changes. The man they had nicknamed the Rule Book was now asking about people's lives, listening to their stories. The race began, and Team Mary cheered loudly as the runners passed. Then they hurried to different points along the route to cheer again. Judge Wilson found himself shouting until his voice grew hoarse. At the halfway mark, Mary was running strong. She waved when she saw them, her face determined but happy. "She's going to make it," Jack said confidently. "Of course she will," Judge Wilson agreed. "Your mother is the strongest person I know." As they waited near the finish line, Judge Wilson thought about his own heart attack. His doctor had called it a warning shot, a chance to change his life before it was too late. And change he had. He now walked 3 miles every day. He ate better. Most importantly, he had opened his heart to others. He had even reconnected with his own son and daughter, who had been surprised but pleased by their father's new outlook. The crowd cheered as the first runners approached the finish. Jack grabbed Judge Wilson's hand in excitement. "There she is!" he shouted. Mary appeared around the final bend. She looked tired, but determined. When she saw Jack and the team cheering, she found a final burst of energy. Judge Wilson felt his eyes grow wet as Mary crossed the finish line. Jack broke away and ran to his mother, who scooped him up despite her exhaustion. Later, as medals were handed out, Judge Wilson approached Mary with a large envelope. "What's this?" she asked, still catching her breath. "Open it," he urged. Inside was a letter confirming her acceptance to the full nursing program with a complete scholarship. There was also a check from the Heart Foundation, donations collected by Team Mary, enough to cover Jack's medicine for a full year. Mary stared at the papers, then at Judge Wilson. "Why?" she whispered. "Why do all this for us?" Judge Wilson smiled gently. "Because you taught me the most important lesson of my life. Justice isn't just about rules. It's about seeing people, really seeing them." Mary hugged him then, and Judge Wilson felt his now stronger heart fill with joy. As they walked together toward the celebration tent, Jack running ahead, Judge Wilson thought about how one moment can change everything. 6 months ago, he had been a lonely man hiding behind rules and distance. Now he understood what truly mattered. Mary had saved more than his life that day in the park. She had saved his humanity.